Hey everybody, so I'm going to continue with my read-through of the Guide to the World of Greyhawk using my coverless version because it's so well used. And we're going to start with the nation descriptions today on Greyhawk Grognard. So, we are going to start with the overview of political divisions, and they give a little introductory material here. There are a few interesting things. I note the use of the word anthropomorphic when describing demi-humans and humanoids, which is, I think, the only time I've seen that used in the actual book. The populations for demi-human and humanoid groups reflect fighting males only, as more complete data is unavailable, which is, I think, significant because, especially when you're dealing with like what I'm doing, my current project with the army lists and things, knowing that means, the actual fighters, the real populations, including non-combatants and children and so forth, could be significantly higher. So that's an interesting bit of information. Now we start off with the prelacy of Almor, which is between Nyrond and the Great Kingdom, and the thing that jumps out at me at first is the population. The capital, Chathold, has a population of 4,789, and the population of the whole country is 200,000. Now, I realize that Almor is a relatively small nation in the Flanaess, but those population numbers, and the population numbers throughout the entire book follow this same pattern, is enormously small for the amount of area that it covers. When you compare actual medieval population figures from the High Middle Ages, which is the 10th through the 13th centuries, which is roughly the same time scale as we're talking about in the Flanaess, if you equate the fall of Rome with the destruction of the Sulawesi Imperium. When you compare those, I mean, Italy has a population of between 10 and 13 million. When you start looking at it in those terms, I think France has something, even larger, like maybe 20 million. And then you look at a country like this, even a small one with only a couple 100,000, it just, the numbers seem really, really sparse. And I get why. From a game standpoint, having less occupied space means there's more places to have adventures, and it also means that there's less detail for the DM to make up and keep track of. So from a game standpoint, I understand the smaller population sizes, but from a realism standpoint, it's really odd because there's no like great plague or anything that's mentioned that would explain a sudden population crash like that. So it's a weird number, but it's a consistently weird number throughout the entire thing. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Originally a clerical fief of Erde, of Erde, Almor grew in power and independence as the Great Kingdom became weak and decadent. Inspa swears allegiance to it. There are mainly farmers and herdsmen and fisher folk. So you get this, and then it gives details about their army, and it is strongly supported by Nyrond as a buffer between that realm and the Overking, and pays a stipend to help support the standing army of Almor. So they're definitely presented as kind of a weaker ally of Nyrond, as against the Great Kingdom, which makes sense. And I like the idea that it's a clerical fief. It balances out the other clerical fief in the region, which is Medigia, and I've always had it in my mind that they were the two brother war gods. You have Hextor as the patron god of Medigia, and his brother is the patron god of Almor, which I've always thought was Hieronius I always thought was a nice symmetry there. I know some of the Living Greyhawk stuff kind of bends that and makes that a little less likely, but I still like it as primary canon. I think it still works, and I think that was the original intent. We then move on to the Bandit Kingdoms, which in my mind is one of the most interesting places in the Flanaess. Again, we've got a population of 95,000, which is even less, because it's a larger area. It's even less than the population of Almor, which is weird. It does have silver in the Rift area. The Bandit Kingdoms are a collection of petty holdings founded sometime around 300 to 350 Common Year. Each little kingdom is ruled by a robber chieftain claiming a title such as Baron, Boss, Plar, General, Tyrant, etc. And don't forget, this is an article, I think it was in Dragon 64, that actually showed the demarcations of all the different bandits, called Where the Bandits Are. It had the nice map that took the Darlene map and kind of drew in the borders and gave it some details about the armies and who rules which and so forth. It was a really neat article. The relationship persists because no single bandit lord is strong enough to conquer the whole territory, and the combined strength of all is required to defend against neighboring strengths or retributive expeditions. So you get this idea of, in the Bandit Kingdoms, they're constantly sending out raiders into Ten and the Pale and Ayuz and the Horn Society and the Shield Lands and Ernst. They're constantly sending out raiders all around, and those states in turn, raid back to punish them for it, but then they all gang up to defend each other, which is kind of a really interesting dynamic, that they're rivals within themselves, but if they're attacked from outside, they'll band together. And you kind of see this dynamic in some of the later articles in Dragon, the state of the world of Greyhawk, where they talk about what happens in the years 577 and 578. They go in great detail in some of this politicking and raiding, specifically in one of the articles, and they mention that dynamic exactly. And in fact, later on, you see the Tenha host does take over part of one of the Bandit Kingdoms because they were brought in as an ally, which is kind of neat. And then because they were, because they wanted to defend themselves against the Horn Society, which they saw as a greater threat, which is, I thought it was cool. There are probably 10,000 troops in total. So, but like I say, they break down all the troops there. And now I've always thought of that really fragmented portion in the north central Flanaess, north of the Near Dive, as that was what things were like maybe 100 years ago, from there all the way up to Perrinland. So you had this enormous swath of tiny little states, and that's where Ayuz started, was in one of those states up in the northwest, and kind of slowly expanded out to conquer his neighbors, forming that state, and then the lands that are now the Horn Society, well, in 576 are the Horn Society. And that expansion kind of stopped at that point. So, but I like that idea that this is kind of the remnant of what that entire area looked like before the rise of Ayuz and the Horn Society. We move on because this is alphabetical; it's not geographical. So it's bopping all over the map. Now we have Bissel, which is the northern frontier of Kaoland, essentially, and this has a population of 50,000. Again, it's minuscule. There are cities, not big cities, in medieval Europe that have a bigger population than the entire March of Bissel, which is weird. It's been traded hands a few times between Fioriondi and Kaoland. And then it got its own. It got its independence when the Margrave saved the king of Fioriondi, The march now stands as a bulwark between the Ket masses and the rest of the east. It guards Kaoland and the south. So because of this strategic position, both Furiandi, Voluna, and now Kaoland support the Principality, and adventurers and mercenaries from all over the Flonesse can be found there in the ranks of the border companies. And then they talk about the army, and that's an interesting thing because it really does. If you look at the map, you've got these three mountain ranges: the Yatel Mountains, the Barrier Peaks, and the Lortmill Mountains. They all kind of meet in this where Bissel is, and you've got Ket on the one side, Furiandi Voluna on the other, and Kaoland on the south. So it's like this bottleneck that stops up the entire flow from the west, the Sheldamar Peninsula, and then into the rest of the Flonesse. So it's enormously strategically important, and that explains why it's now supported by both of its major good neighbors, which is I think a really neat idea, and it's one that's born of the geography. Okay, so we're going to do one more. We'll end up here with Blackmoor, and I love the title that the leader has. His luminous preponderancy. His luminous preponderancy, Archbaron Bestmo of Blackmoor. That's just a great title. The capital has a population of 666, which is both tiny and obviously significant. Population 20 to 30,000. Considerable numbers of humanoids, so there could be maybe 10,000 more humanoids in there. This little known territory exists between the fierce nomads to the south. They're the rovers of the barons, and the wolf nomads. And the land of black ice to the north, protected by the marshes and the ICC, yada yada. The original capital, Blackmoor, and its castle were sacked and ruined some years ago, but extensive labyrinths are supposed to exist under these ruins. There is also purported to be a strange city of the gods somewhere within the Archbarony, and then they talk about the army. It's obviously Blackmoor is supposed to be Dave Arneson's Blackmoor, although officially it's just a place with the same name, like 10 is the same. Dave Arneson had a Duchy of 10 in his campaign as well, and there's also a Duchy of 10 in Greyhawk, but it's it just sounded like a cool name, Gygax once said. So it's obvious that this was intended to be his Arneson's campaign world as part of the world of Greyhawk, and if they hadn't had their great falling out, maybe a lot of things might have taken place in that along those lines. I know some Greyhawk fans have done some extensive work on putting Arneson's Blackmoor into Greyhawk. I forget who. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll put it in the comments or something. But somebody did a lot of work. They did a map so that the Arneson campaign fits into the hexes that on the Darlene map, and did a lot of work integrating the world, Arneson's campaign into the world of Greyhawk. A couple of people have done a ton of work on that, and it's well worth seeking out. The maps especially I'm thrilled with, and the City of the Gods. There's actually a Gygax has told the story a couple times of how his characters went into this thing, and it's essentially a sci-fi scenario. The City of the Gods, all these metal towers and things, and there's automated. I think Ernie was with him in this, and there's like automated defenses and robots and things. The Blackmoor originally was a lot more sci-fi, a mix of sci-fi and fantasy than Greyhawk was, although Greyhawk had elements of that as well. But I really think, at least for a home campaign, there's no reason that you couldn't try to integrate a lot of the Arnesonian material into a World of Greyhawk campaign and have a lot of fun with that. I would love to run the City of the Gods module that was published by TSR back in the day. That would be a great fit to throw in there, and the Temple of the Frog and things like that. So TSR did publish a bunch of Arneson's modules. I believe after Gary left as part of the 2E era, so those are worth seeking out. There it is, and again, you can find Gary's account of going through that dungeon, the City of the Gods, online in some places. So that too is very cool. So anyway, we're gonna stop there because I don't like to make these too long. Hope you are enjoying this series. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please consider joining the Patreon. It really does help make all this possible. And hey, I will talk to you later. Hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.